mothers should feel guilty if they try and didn't, or if they don't feel they want to try. And I think that's important, to keep some common sense, to keep some open-mindedness about it. And they do very well in formula. Obviously, you have some good proof, and I think often the proof of the pudding is better than what's written in the book sometimes. As you went along, when did you get into solid food with your infants?
Well, with Aaron, you know, we went by the books. They said to wait till the 4 months, and we did wait till Dr. Ossie said it at the 4 months. But his theory with the triplets was that they would sleep better for us if they had a little bit of solid food just one time at 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that is when they started sleeping through the night. We gave the cereal just at night with the last feeding, and that's when they slept through the night at 3 months old. And that did seem to do the trick.
I think a number of pediatricians who have been in practice a while or have had children of their own, and myself included, I think it's certainly worth a try giving some rice cereal to try to encourage them to sleep a little bit longer and easier at night. I often think that the liquid diet, the breast milk or formula, is a little bit like Chinese food, and they can be topped up and quite satisfied for a few hours, but then you're hungry again. And I think of the rice cereals like beef stew, and that's good till morning. I think it just takes solid food longer to get out of their stomach, and I think they're just a little bit more content and feel more satisfied. And it isn't a guarantee. I think some babies are worse if they're not ready for it. They get crampy and gassy, and they'll sleep even worse for giving the cereal. But a number of babies, I think it does seem to help them.
We also try to make the last feeding somewhere around 10 o'clock at night. Adjust the schedule so we eventually get it around 10 o'clock at night. And that seemed to be able to carry them almost till 6 in the morning.
Sure, because that's when you're thinking of going to bed, and if you feed them at 7 or 8, they're going to be thinking getting up at about 10:30 or 11, just when you're starting to get to sleep.
So change it a half hour every night till we eventually got to that later.
Molding them to fit in with the family. I know it's funny, Fane mentioned how you had 1 day a week that you sort of took over, and Fane works 1 day a week. And right from the first that I went into practice, I used to take Wednesdays off. And I think all my patients thought I was very lucky to have 1 day off, and I was on a 4-day week. But that was my day on at home, more or less. It was a half day. I would take the morning or the afternoon, and my wife would take the half day off. And I was always glad to get back to work on Thursday after my Wednesday off. It seemed a lot easier to deal with 30 or 40 infants in the office for 5, 10, 15-minute intervals than to have 4 of our own for 4 or 5 straight hours. What is your, now is it a Wednesday or is there?
It's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday is your
so
day.
Normally I'll get home
Let me say he starts with 2 hours sleep, but tell how you start the day.
I get home at 4:30 in the morning roughly and get up at 6:30 in the morning. Get everybody off, help Fane get everybody out of the house to school, except for Tara and the twins. And then if I can convince, I will get the twins into bed. If I can convince Tara to go into bed, then I'm all set. But I can't always convince Tara to do that. So sometimes I'm up until 9 o'clock that night. So I'm glad to go back to work on Wednesday also.
The same way. I think you're hearing the secret of a solid, successful marriage here, though. I think the fathers, my father, for example, who I don't think had very much to do with us as infants and small children. I think when we were a little bit older and could perhaps throw a baseball back and forth or wrestle, then I think he began to get comfortable with us. I was one of 3 boys. But I do see the fathers now. I see them bringing the babies into the office and taking part at home and being comfortable with the babies, and I think it's good for mom to get a little breathing room and some help. I think it's good for fathers. I think fathers missed a lot when they really weren't in on it from the beginning. They're so special, that first year, the early infancy. And I think, we talk about all the bonding with breastfeeding and mother-child, but I think there's bonding with father, too, and it's good. It's a good thing to take place, and I encourage it. I just wanted to talk a little bit about economics. You two have certainly had to sit down with a pencil and paper with your 7 and with triplets, and you formula fed. And I think that's expensive.
Mm-hmm, very expensive.
And I think it's important for parents to know that there are programs available. Some of our tax money isn't wasted, and I'll mention things like the WIC program. And I think young parents should certainly look into, is there some help from the city or from the state. And this is good help. I like to see our tax money when it goes towards helping children or families or social problems. When did your infants come off of formula and go on to whole milk? Because that's a big economic move for sure.
At a year.
Yeah.
At about a year.
Right.
See, I think I cheat a little bit, and I will still mention that in my experience, I think it's all right to try whole milk as early as 8 or 9 months. If we have a good family history, it isn't loaded with allergies, food allergies and asthma, if the infant seems to have had a very good digestive system through those first several months, they haven't been allergic, they haven't had colic, they haven't been really gassy or spitty. And it doesn't take long to find out that you were wrong. If the baby, with an early trial of milk with a small amount, starts spitting up and getting rashy and gassy, and you know they're not ready, and we go back to the formula and we don't try it again until a year. Our dietitian that was on the last program, our 2 dietitians, one of them mentioned evaporated milk, which used to be a formula 20, 25 years ago. Infants would go home from the hospital on evaporated milk. It is a very nourishing formula. It's very economical. It has to be watered down. You have to put about a ratio of 12 or 13 ounces of the evaporated milk to about 19 ounces of water, which is like a can of evaporated milk, a can and a half of water, and about 2 tablespoons of something like Caro syrup to add sugar to get up to about 20 calories per ounce. It fell out of, it isn't fashionable, it isn't in, it doesn't have the vitamins, but certainly after 6 months or at 9 months, it's a thought. I think it's an economic move. It is good. You have to vitamin supplement it. But again, I think it's a thought. I think getting the solid foods going at as early as 3 or 4 months, certainly at 6 months, they're going to get more calories from solid food, and that's going to cut back on the amount of formula that's used. And certainly, the dietitian, as again the last program mentioned, making your own foods so that you don't have to pay. Did you get into making your own
With
foods?
Aaron, we never made a single food. I bought baby foods for wherever I went all the time, for the whole year, I think. But then with the triplets, we were buying 50, 60, 70 jars of it at a time. And we thought we should just use this blender we got for our wedding that we never
tell them
used.
today what they actually ate.
And we would
they
put
cringed,
everything in the
'cause Some of
blender.
it came out purple.
But
they
they
would
didn't
eat
notice.
it
They
all.
didn't know. So.
No, they were hungry and
Concoctions.
down
but
with
they
the
ate
purple
everything
food.
right from the blender.
Yes,
Yep.
and that was certainly cost
Everything that
saving.
we cooked, carrots, potatoes, everything, we would just put into the blender and they ate it.
I will loosen up on the diet quite a bit at 6 months into a lot of table foods if they haven't been making their own foods. And a lot of the foods can be just mushed up with a fork at that stage, and mashed potatoes and plain yogurt with little baby fruit, and the bland vegetables, the carrots and the green beans and the squash can be mashed up. And I wanted to get to a few of the common problems, and I want to ask you right off, what would you do to prevent diaper rashes, starting right off from the beginning, those first weeks or months?
Well, we buy the Chubs, the Chubs, they're called Chub wet ones, and they have lanolin and aloe in it. And we use those, and we never get a diaper rash unless we run out. The only time we've ever gotten a diaper rash in the last 10 years is if we used cloths, like a
Face cloth.
a face cloth or something to clean them with, and that you just didn't get them totally clean, or it didn't dry properly. But when we use those Chub wet ones, we never get a diaper rash.
Very good tip. The Chubbs people should be happy to hear that too, I suppose. Although we're not working on commission here. This is totally... I've often felt too that with a newborn baby, the less you do, the better. That nature is very good at taking care of itself. I think if we're a little bit too vigorous and enthusiastic and aggressive and wash them down with soap and water 3 or 4 times a day, we remove their own oils. I think keeping them dry as possible. And I'll often say, don't use soap, just use warm water. Use a medicated powder. Once you've washed them, rinsed them off, and dried them, to use a medicated powder to just keep their skin dry and cool. And then when they're going in for a longer sleep, I'll often mention putting Vaseline. If they are sleeping a 4 or 5, 6, several hour stretch, to put some Vaseline on them, because the baby could wet the very first hour that they're in, and if they're sleeping several hours and they've got a urine or bowel movement in direct contact with their skin, without some protection like Vaseline, they're going to rash up. It won't be a bad rash, and you can go to work on it the next day and relieve it. But I think sometimes they do get a rash. I think it's not the parent's fault, and the parent shouldn't feel guilty. I think sometimes the food goes through undigested and is irritating. I think sometimes they have a urine that's a little bit too strong and acidy, or they do wet and they're unprotected and they're in that urine for a long time, or bowel movement, or they get a little intestinal virus and have diarrhea, and the diarrhea bowel movement is very irritating. And I think sometimes, no matter what, the babies will get into a horrendous type of rash. And usually then you're in contact with the doctor. If you try all your tricks and you can't solve it, usually you're in contact with your doctor. And often it'll mean a prescription ointment or a prescription cream or a couple of prescription items that will take care of it. First cold, I think, is going to happen. I don't think, maybe if we're in California or Florida, you can get through the first year without a cold, but not in New England. The few things that I have found helpful to mention with a first cold is I don't think parents have to rush to the drugstore at the first sneeze or the first sniffle or the first fever. And I don't think there's any need to panic either when the baby has a cold, even if they are a little feverish and fussy. I think you do the common sense things. I think you don't crank the heat up to 85 because that's going to make them stuffier. In fact, better to lower the temperature a little bit, maybe down to 65, and dress the baby maybe a little bit warmer. But I think breathing cool air helps keep their breathing passages clear rather than hot, stuffy air. I think making sure there's enough moisture in the air, vaporizer, humidifier, that's soothing. I think if the baby has secretions that are a little dry, you can use salt water nose drops. They're over the counter. I think positioning the baby in a sitting position or a more or less upright position, or even sleeping them with their head a few inches higher than their feet, so that, like ourselves, if we lie flat, our nose totally blocks, we can't sleep. I think in good weather, I think there's nothing wrong with taking the baby out in the fresh air. If it's over 50 degrees and blue sky and sunny and the cool fresh air will get their nose running, and that'll help. I save medicine for a specific indication. Like if they are feverish or fussy, yes, use one of the over-the-counter fever pain remedies, and by trade name the Tylenol, the Tempra, they're all pretty much the same medicine with different flavorings, or a decongestant that they might take at night for sleeping, an over-the-counter antihistamine decongestant, mostly just for sleeping. What have you found for colds? What's been a...
The cool air vaporizer has probably been our best, and this Tylenol. I don't think other than that we really do too much for colds.
No, the only time
They
we
sort of
had a
run their
problem
course.
one time was when we had a baby with croup.
Croup, yeah.
And that was probably the only time that I can remember that we kind of,
Panic.
jumped the gun.
Croup is a little frightening, but croup is a more serious illness beyond the common cold.
And I can remember he had trouble breathing, and we called 911 for an ambulance because we thought he was going to stop breathing, although I knew how to get him to stop breathing again. As soon as we went outside in the cold air, he was much better by the time we got there, because I hadn't thought of that
fresh air.
common sense of just going out into the cold.
You know, I wanted to put one mention in before we finish about safety. And I know we're a lifeguard, and I really cast a strong vote for teaching infants how to not swim for records, but to not panic if they get water in their face. And infant swim programs, I think, are really wise. I think, I know we're running out of time, and I'll just put that plug in. I won't ask you how you do it, but I know you're going to be giving some swim instruction this summer.
And even my babies can swim.
Just
you know.
so that if they fall
Yep.
in, they won't panic.
And
They
babies
know
aren't
about
afraid of it,
lifting
yep.
their nose and getting some air and then giving a cry, and they're saved. I want to thank you both very much for coming on tonight. There's a lot to talk about. We may have to do a part 2 on this. I think you get an idea anyway about surviving the parenting experience in the first year, and I hope you get an idea about teamwork from the Sullivans tonight. And I always like to just mention the title of our show is Raising Children with God, and that's one of the reasons we have this show, not just to teach parents, but also to include God in our parenting experience, to ask for His help, to say thanks when things are going well, and to pray for God's help. And I think we've left that out lately in America. I think a lot of families,